Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to ancient Egypt, a world of powerful pharaohs, ancient temples, and forgotten secrets waiting to be uncovered. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine opening your eyes nearly 3,000 years ago, in the heart of ancient Egypt. The first golden rays of the morning sun spill across the endless Nile, painting the water with shimmering light. In the distance, the silhouettes of enormous temples rise above the mist, while priests quietly prepare their morning rituals, and farmers begin another day beside the life-giving river. You have no idea that every decision you make today, from the bread you eat to the path you walk, will be shaped by traditions that have existed for thousands of years. Around you, people whisper the names of powerful gods, believing they control the floodwaters, the harvest, and even the fate of every soul after death. As the village slowly awakens, a distant horn echoes across the fields. Merchants are already loading their boats. Stonemasons are lifting enormous limestone blocks. Children hurry to help their families before the desert heat arrives. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Pharaoh's officials are preparing orders that will affect thousands of lives before the sun sets. And without realizing it, you are about to witness one ordinary day inside one of history's greatest civilizations. A day that will reveal secrets most people have never truly imagined. The morning air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh river water as the first light spreads across the Nile. Around you, the village is already stirring to life. There are no alarm clocks, no ringing bells, and certainly no rushing traffic. Instead, the day begins with sounds that have echoed across this land for thousands of years. The soft calls of birds, the distant lowing of cattle, and the gentle splash of wooden boats gliding across the river. You rise from a simple, woven reed mat laid across the hard earthen floor. Your home, built from sun-dried mud bricks, has kept the night's cool air trapped inside. The walls are plain, yet sturdy enough to withstand the blazing Egyptian sun that will soon dominate the sky. Outside, your family is already awake. Your mother carefully grinds grain between two heavy stones, slowly turning it into flour for the day's bread. The steady scraping sound fills the small courtyard while a clay oven nearby begins to warm. Fresh bread is not a luxury here, it is life itself. Almost every meal depends on it. Your father wastes no time. Before the sun climbs higher, he gathers his simple farming tools and prepares for another long day in the fields. Every season follows the rhythm of the Nile. If the river floods as expected, crops will grow. If it fails, hunger will visit every household. You quickly eat a small piece of coarse bread with onions and a cup of weak beer, a common breakfast even for children. The drink contains little alcohol, but is much safer than untreated water from canals that often carry disease. For the people of ancient Egypt, beer is not simply a drink. It is part of everyday survival. As you step beyond the village, golden sunlight begins to reveal the endless green fields stretching beside the river. Workers move quietly through the crops, while fishermen pull heavy nets from the water, hoping for a good catch before the afternoon heat becomes unbearable. Far in the distance, towering above the trees and villages, stands the silhouette of a magnificent temple. Even from here, it dominates the landscape, reminding everyone that the gods are never far away. Priests have already begun the morning ceremonies inside, offering incense, bread, and prayers long before ordinary villagers start their daily work. You have never entered those sacred halls. Very few people ever will. Yet today, something unusual is about to happen. Something that will slowly pull you closer to that mysterious world than you ever imagined possible. The path toward the fields is quiet at first. Cool morning air brushes against your face as the village slowly disappears behind you. Ahead, the Nile stretches across the land like a ribbon of life, feeding every farm, every family, and every dream in the kingdom. An older farmer walks beside you without saying much. He has traveled this same path almost every morning for decades. His hands are rough, his back slightly bent, and his face bears the marks of countless seasons beneath the Egyptian sun. Without looking at you, he quietly says, "The Nile decides whether we eat or go hungry." It sounds simple, but everyone knows it is true. Unlike today, there are no machines to help with the harvest. Every field depends on human hands. Men guide wooden plows pulled by oxen, women gather bundles of grain beneath the rising sun, and children carry water, collect tools, or scare hungry birds away from the crops. The work begins as soon as you arrive. Your feet sink into the rich black soil left behind by the river's annual flood. This dark earth is the greatest treasure Egypt possesses. Without it, these green fields would become nothing more than endless desert. As the hours pass, the temperature rises steadily. Sweat runs down your face, and even the smallest task feels heavier beneath the burning sky. Still, nobody complains. Hard work is simply part of life here, just as certain as tomorrow's sunrise. Around midday, everyone pauses beneath the shade of a few scattered date palms. Lunch is simple: fresh bread, onions, dried fish, and cool water carried in clay jars. Nobody expects a grand feast. A full stomach and a few moments of rest are more valuable than luxury. While you eat, a sudden silence spreads across the fields. Several workers stop what they are doing and turn toward the distant road. Dust rises into the air as a small group of officials slowly approaches the village. Their clean white linen clothes and polished staffs make it clear they are not ordinary travelers. No one speaks. Even before they arrive, everyone understands that officials from the Pharaoh rarely visit without an important reason. The officials finally reach the edge of the fields. Their white linen robes are spotless despite the dusty road behind them. Each carries a long wooden staff marked with the symbol of the Pharaoh. Even before they speak, every worker lowers their head in respect. The oldest official slowly unrolls a sheet of papyrus. His voice is calm but firm as he begins reading the Pharaoh's decree. Every nearby village must provide workers for a royal building project along the Nile. Some will cut limestone from distant quarries. Others will transport heavy blocks by boat. Skilled craftsmen will shape stone, while ordinary farmers will help whenever the flooding season leaves the fields underwater. No one dares interrupt. For the people gathered here, serving the Pharaoh is more than an order. It is considered a duty to both the king and the gods. Many believe the Pharaoh was chosen by the sun god Ra himself, and obeying him helps maintain the balance of the entire world. After reading the decree, the officials begin writing names on fresh papyrus. Families wait quietly while village elders answer their questions. They ask about every household, every worker, and every pair of strong hands that might be sent to the royal project. You watch carefully as a scribe dips a reed pen into black ink. His writing is unlike anything you have ever seen. Every symbol is drawn with remarkable precision. Birds, eyes, reeds, snakes, and tiny figures appear across the papyrus in neat rows. To most villagers, these mysterious hieroglyphs are impossible to read. Only trained scribes understand their meaning. Becoming a scribe is one of the few paths to a different life. While farmers spend their days beneath the burning sun, scribes work in the shade, recording taxes, harvests, trade, and royal commands. Their knowledge earns respect wherever they go. For a brief moment, you cannot stop watching the movement of the pen. Every mark seems to hold power, as if a few simple symbols can change the future of an entire family. Soon, one of the officials quietly calls your father's name. The official looks down at the papyrus before raising his eyes toward your father. For a few quiet moments, no one says a word. The only sounds come from the breeze moving through the grain and the distant cries of birds circling above the Nile. Your father steps forward and bows his head respectfully. The official explains that experienced farmers are needed for the coming flood season. When the Nile rises, the royal storehouses must be supplied with enough grain to feed thousands of workers across the kingdom. Every village has its responsibility, and every family must do its part. The village elder nods in agreement. These orders are not questioned. They are accepted as naturally as the rising and setting of the sun. Soon, several names are added to the list. Some men will leave within a few days. Others will remain to tend the fields until the floodwaters arrive. No one knows exactly how long they will be away. Weeks often become months and sometimes even longer. As the officials continue their work, the scribe carefully rolls up the papyrus. Not a single mark is wasted. Papyrus is valuable, and every written record may one day decide taxes, land ownership, or a family's obligations. You cannot help watching him. His movements are slow and deliberate. Years of practice have made every stroke of the reed pen look effortless. In a land where very few people can read or write, knowledge itself has become a rare form of power. The officials finally prepare to leave. Their sandals leave shallow footprints in the dusty road as they disappear toward the next village waiting beyond the palm trees. Life quickly returns to its familiar rhythm. The oxen continue pulling wooden plows. Fishermen drift quietly across the Nile. Children laugh as they chase one another between the trees. And before long, the blazing Egyptian sun climbs even higher above the endless river, bringing with it another ordinary afternoon in one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. As the afternoon slowly fades, the fierce Egyptian sun begins to lose its strength. Long shadows stretch across the fields, and the day's work finally comes to an end. One by one, farmers gather their tools, while oxen are led back toward the village, along the dusty paths beside the Nile. The walk home is quieter than the journey that morning. Everyone is tired, yet no one complains. This has been the rhythm of life for generations, and tomorrow will begin exactly the same way. By the time you reach home, your mother has already prepared the evening meal. Fresh bread, lentils, onions, and a small piece of dried fish are placed on simple clay dishes. The family sits together on woven mats, eating slowly as the last golden light disappears beyond the western desert. As darkness settles over the village, the air finally becomes cooler. Oil lamps flicker inside the mud brick homes, while children gather outside to listen to the stories told by their grandparents. Tonight, an old storyteller speaks about Osiris, the great god who ruled the land of the dead. He tells how every soul must one day stand before the gods, where the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. If the heart is light, the soul enters eternal peace. If it is heavy with lies and wrongdoing, its journey ends forever. The younger children listen with wide eyes. The older villagers simply nod. They have heard these stories countless times, yet they never grow old. Above the village, thousands of stars slowly appear across the clear desert sky. Without the lights of modern cities, the heavens seem brighter than you could ever imagine. Your father quietly points toward a group of stars and explains that travelers and boatmen have used them for generations to find their way along the Nile during the night. Eventually, one by one, the oil lamps are extinguished. Silence spreads across the village. Only the gentle sound of the river and the soft breeze moving through the palm trees remain as another peaceful night settles over ancient Egypt. The first light of dawn quietly returns to the banks of the Nile. Before the village is fully awake, a thin layer of mist drifts across the river, softening the outlines of fishing boats tied to the shore. Roosters begin to crow, and smoke slowly rises from the first cooking fires. You wake to the familiar sounds of another ordinary morning. The cool air will not last long. Within a few hours, the Egyptian sun will once again turn the fields into a sea of shimmering heat. Your mother is already kneading dough for fresh bread, while your father quietly sharpens a simple bronze sickle. Neither speaks much. There is always work waiting. Outside, neighbors greet one another as they carry baskets, ropes, and clay jars towards the fields. Some fishermen push their boats into the gentle current before sunrise, hoping to return with enough fish to trade before the busiest hours of the day. Not far from the village, a group of donkeys passes along the riverbank carrying baskets filled with grain. Behind them, merchants lead another small caravan loaded with linen cloth, pottery, and jars of oil. The Nile is more than a river. It is the road that connects villages, temples, markets, and royal cities across the kingdom. As you begin walking once again, you notice something different. Several strangers have arrived during the night. Their clothing is unlike that of the villagers. Fine linen wraps neatly around their bodies, and small carved amulets hang from their necks. They speak politely with the village elder before unloading wooden chests from a large riverboat. Curiosity spreads quickly. Children gather at a distance, whispering among themselves, while adults pretend not to stare. One chest is carefully opened. Inside are brightly painted jars, polished copper tools, small carved statues, colourful beads, rolls of papyrus, and delicate jewellery that most farming families could never afford. For a little while, the quiet village begins to feel like a busy marketplace, as neighbours slowly gather to see goods that have travelled many miles along the Nile. Several strangers have arrived during the night. Their clothing is unlike that of the villagers. Fine linen wraps neatly around their bodies, and small carved amulets hang from their necks. They speak politely with the village elder before unloading wooden chests from a large riverboat. Curiosity spreads quickly. You step a little closer, staying behind your father. At your age, you've never seen travelers carrying so many valuable goods. Your eyes remain fixed on the heavy wooden chests as they are carefully lowered onto the ground. Children gather nearby, whispering excitedly, while the adults pretend not to stare. One chest is slowly opened. Inside are brightly painted jars, polished copper tools, small carved statues, colourful beads, rolls of papyrus, and delicate jewellery that few farming families could ever hope to own. One of the merchants notices your curiosity and smiles. He picks up a tiny blue amulet carved from stone and places it gently in your hand. It is cool and surprisingly smooth. He explains that many people wear charms like this for protection during long journeys along the Nile. You turn the small amulet over in your fingers, wondering how many distant towns and temples it has already visited before reaching your village. For the first time in your life, you begin to realize that the world is far larger than the quiet fields surrounding your home. You carefully hand the small blue amulet back to the merchant. He nods with a warm smile before placing it inside the wooden chest once again. Before leaving, the merchants trade grain for linen, pottery, dried fish, and baskets woven from reeds. Coins are still unknown here. Almost everything is exchanged through trade, just as it has been for generations. As the boats drift away with the gentle current of the Nile, you continue watching until they become tiny shapes in the distance. You cannot stop wondering what lies beyond the villages you have always known. That evening, you ask your father if he has ever travelled farther down the river. He smiles quietly before answering. Only once. Many years ago, when he was about your age, he was sent with other young men to help repair irrigation canals near a larger town. It was the first time he had seen stone temples covered in carvings, busy marketplaces filled with strangers, and ships carrying goods from places whose names he had never heard before. He tells you that the world beyond your village is far bigger than most people imagine. Some spend their entire lives beside the same fields, while others travel the Nile and witness cities that seem almost impossible to believe. You listen without saying a word. That night, as you lie on your woven reed mat, your thoughts are no longer filled with tomorrow's work in the fields. Instead, you picture enormous temples rising beside the river, crowded markets echoing with unfamiliar voices, and great boats sailing toward places hidden beyond the horizon. For the first time, a quiet dream begins to grow inside you. One day, you hope to see those places with your own eyes. The dream stays with you long after the sun rises the next morning. Life, however, follows its familiar rhythm. You help your father repair a narrow irrigation channel that carries water from the Nile into the nearby fields. Using simple wooden shovels, everyone works together, clearing away mud and reeds that have gathered during the past few days. Your father reminds you that no family can survive alone. If one canal becomes blocked, every field downstream suffers. That is why neighbours help one another, even when the work is difficult. By midday, the village elder walks along the canal with a messenger from a nearby town. The messenger announces that a large market will be held in a few days, attracting merchants, fishermen, craftsmen, and farmers from villages across the region. Your father decides that this year you are old enough to go with him. The news fills you with quiet excitement. For the next several days, your family prepares baskets of grain, dried onions, woven reed mats, and small clay pots to exchange at the market. Every item has value and nothing is wasted. At last, the morning of the journey arrives. Before sunrise, dozens of villagers gather along the riverbank. Some carry goods on donkeys, while others carefully load baskets onto wooden boats tied beside the shore. As the boat slowly pushes away from the bank, your village begins to disappear behind you. The Nile stretches endlessly ahead, calm and silent beneath the golden morning sky. You sit near the front of the boat, watching unfamiliar villages pass one after another. Some have larger houses than yours. Others have small shrines standing near the water, where travelers pause to offer quiet prayers before continuing their journey. Every bend in the river reveals something new. With each passing mile, the world you have always known feels just a little smaller. The journey continues through the quiet morning. The boat moves steadily with the current while the boatman guides it using a long wooden oar. On both sides of the Nile, life unfolds without hurry. Farmers bend over their fields, fishermen cast woven nets into the water, and children wave as passing boats drift by. After several hours, the river becomes busier. Large cargo boats loaded with limestone blocks float downstream toward royal building sites. Smaller fishing boats weave between them with practiced ease. The boatman points ahead and quietly says that the busiest towns are never far from the water. Before long, the market comes into view. It is far larger than anything you have ever imagined. Dozens of boats line the riverbank. Donkeys carry sacks of grain through crowded paths. Merchants call out to passing customers while craftsmen display polished copper tools, painted pottery, wooden furniture, baskets, sandals, perfumes, and brightly coloured linen cloth. The air is filled with voices from villages you have never visited. Your father reminds you to stay close. Everything here is unfamiliar. As you walk beside him, you notice a craftsman carefully carving tiny hieroglyphs into a smooth piece of limestone. Nearby, another man shapes a wooden chair with remarkable skill, while a woman patiently weaves colourful linen that will one day be worn by someone far wealthier than anyone in your village. For hours, your father exchanges grain and woven mats for tools your family will need during the coming months. You help carry the supplies back toward the boat, but before leaving, something catches your attention. Near the edge of the market, a small crowd has gathered around an elderly storyteller. His calm voice rises above the noise as children and adults quietly gather to listen. You gently place the baskets beside your father before quietly moving closer to the crowd. The old storyteller sits beneath the shade of a large sycamore tree. His hair is white, his voice soft, yet every person around him listens without interruption. He does not speak of kings or great battles. Instead, he tells the story of an ordinary boat builder who spent his entire life along the Nile. Every morning, the man shaped wooden planks beneath the rising sun. Every evening, he returned home with tired hands and little more than enough food for his family. To many people, his life seemed small, but the storyteller smiles. The Nile remembers every pair of honest hands, he says. Some people in the crowd quietly nod. Others simply close their eyes and listen. The storyteller explains that Egypt is not built by the Pharaoh alone. It stands because of countless farmers who grow the grain, fishermen who fill their nets, potters who shape clay, builders who lift stone, and families who wake before sunrise every single day. Without them, even the greatest temple would remain unfinished. You glance toward your father. For the first time, you begin to see his work differently. The long days in the fields, the tired hands, the quiet determination. They are all part of something much larger than your own village. When the storyteller finishes, nobody applauds. Instead, people thank him with small gifts, a loaf of bread, a handful of dates, or a clay cup filled with water. As the afternoon sun slowly begins to sink, your father places a hand on your shoulder. It is time to begin the journey home along the Nile. The boat leaves the crowded market behind as the afternoon light turns golden across the Nile. You sit quietly beside your father, watching the river flow past. The excitement of the market slowly fades, but your mind remains full of everything you have seen. After a while, your father points toward a narrow strip of rich, black soil beside the river. "Remember this," he says softly. "Everything begins here." He explains that every year the Nile rises and spreads across the land, leaving behind fertile mud that makes farming possible. Without the river, the fields would dry into endless desert, and the great cities of Egypt could never exist. As the boat drifts onward, another vessel passes nearby. Its passengers are temple workers returning from a distant city. Their boat carries baskets of fruit, bundles of papyrus, jars of oil, and carefully wrapped statues covered with linen cloth. The men lower their heads respectfully as the two boats pass one another. Even far from the temples, the gods are never forgotten. Near sunset, the familiar outline of your village finally appears. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires. Children run along the riverbank, and several fishermen are already repairing their nets for tomorrow. The moment your boat touches the shore, your younger brother runs toward you with a wide smile, eager to hear everything about the market. That evening, while sharing the simple meal of bread, onions, and lentils, you tell your family about the crowded streets, the skilled craftsmen, the storyteller beneath the sycamore tree, and the endless boats that filled the river. Your grandfather listens quietly. When you finish, he smiles and says, "One journey always leads to another." You do not fully understand his words yet, but somewhere deep inside, you know this will not be the last time you travel beyond the village. Several weeks pass and life settles back into its familiar rhythm. Each morning begins before sunrise. You help carry water from the Nile, feed the family's goats, and walk beside your father to the fields. The work is still difficult, but your hands have grown stronger, and the wooden tools no longer feel as heavy as they once did. The days become warmer. Everyone in the village watches the river closely. The elders study the water level, the color of the current, and the distant clouds to the south. They know the Nile will soon begin its yearly flood, the event that decides whether the coming harvest will bring abundance or hardship. One evening, your grandfather invites you to sit beside him outside the house. He points toward the dark river. "When I was your age," he says, "I thought the Nile was only water. It took me many years to understand that it is the heartbeat of Egypt." You listen quietly. He explains that long before your grandparents were born, their grandparents stood on these same riverbanks, watching the same floodwaters arrive year after year. Kingdoms have changed. Pharaohs have come and gone. Yet the Nile continues its endless journey. The following morning, the village is unusually busy. Men strengthen the mud walls surrounding the fields. Women store extra grain inside large clay jars. Children gather bundles of reeds that will be needed once the floodwaters begin to rise. Everyone has done this many times before. For you, however, it is the first time you will truly witness the great flooding season with your own eyes. As the sun slowly climbs above the eastern horizon, you walk to the riverbank with your father. The Nile looks calm, but he quietly tells you that within days, everything you see will begin to change. The next morning, you return to the river before sunrise. At first, nothing seems different. The surface of the Nile is smooth, reflecting the pale colors of the waking sky. Birds glide low above the water, and fishermen quietly untangle their nets as they prepare for another day. Your father kneels near the riverbank. Without speaking, he places a small stick into the wet soil at the water's edge. You watch him carefully. "This is how my father taught me," he says. "Tomorrow, we'll see if the river has moved." Every morning after that, you return together. Some days, the water barely changes. On others, it creeps forward just enough for your father to notice. The elders smile to themselves. They have seen these small signs many times before. One afternoon, the village messenger arrives carrying welcome news. The flood is rising farther south. It has already reached several villages upstream, and before long, it will arrive here as well. No one panics. Instead, the entire village becomes even busier. Families carry grain into higher storage rooms. Wooden fences are repaired. Small boats are pulled closer to the houses so they will be ready when the fields disappear beneath the water. You spend the rest of the day helping your father move baskets, clay jars, and farming tools to safer ground. By sunset, everyone is tired. As darkness falls, you stand outside your home and look toward the Nile. In the fading light, the river seems almost unchanged. Yet every person in the village knows that beneath its calm surface, the great flood is slowly making its way north, just as it has done for countless generations. A few days later, the change becomes impossible to ignore. When you walk to the river at dawn, the small wooden stick your father placed beside the bank is no longer standing. It has disappeared beneath the rising water. Your father smiles. The flood has arrived. Slowly, the Nile begins to spread beyond its usual banks. The current moves with quiet strength, covering the lower fields first, before reaching the narrow footpaths that only yesterday were dry. There is no fear among the villagers. Instead, they watch the river with quiet respect. For them, this is not a disaster. It is a gift that returns every year, bringing fresh black soil from lands far to the south. During the following days, boats replace walking paths. Children laugh as they paddle between clusters of palm trees, while fishermen find new places to cast their nets across the flooded countryside. Your own work changes as well. There is little farming to do now, so your father spends his mornings repairing tools, weaving new baskets and helping neighbours strengthen the walls of their homes before the water rises any farther. You stay close beside him, learning how to shape reeds into strong rope and patch cracks in the mud bricks before they become larger. One afternoon, your grandfather leads you to a small hill overlooking the flooded valley. From there, the view is unlike anything you have ever seen. The green fields have become a vast, shining lake, broken only by villages, palm trees, and the roofs of storehouses rising above the water. Hundreds of birds circle overhead, taking advantage of the new wetlands, while boats glide silently across places where crops had stood only weeks before. Your grandfather quietly says, "This is why Egypt lives." You stand beside him without speaking, watching the endless water stretch toward the horizon. The days of the flood pass peacefully. With most of the fields resting beneath the water, the pace of life becomes slower than at any other time of the year. Each morning, your father finds a different task. Some days he repairs fishing nets with the older men of the village. On other days, he helps a neighbour replace damaged mud bricks, or mends the wooden handles of farming tools before the planting season returns. You spend your time learning whatever he is willing to teach. At first, your knots are loose. Your baskets lean to one side, your hands move too slowly. But with each passing day, your father corrects your mistakes with quiet patience. He rarely offers praise, yet one evening he simply nods after examining a basket you have woven. It is only a small gesture. Still, it fills you with more pride than you expected. A few days later, another boat arrives from a nearby town. This time it carries not merchants, but craftsmen looking for young helpers. They need extra hands to repair a riverside warehouse that was damaged during the last flood season. Several older boys from the village step forward immediately. You watch them with growing curiosity. Most are only a few years older than you, yet they already know how to cut timber, smooth stone, shape bricks, and lift heavy beams with practiced hands. As the craftsmen prepare to leave, one of them notices you watching. He smiles and says, "Keep learning. Every skill opens another door." Those words stay with you long after the boat disappears around the bend in the river. That evening, as you help your father stack dried reeds beside the house, you begin to wonder what skills you will master in the years ahead. The floodwaters begin to fall as quietly as they arrived. Each morning, a little more land emerges from beneath the Nile. The rich, black soil glistens in the sunlight, soft and full of life. Before long, the villagers return to the fields with renewed energy. This is the busiest season of the year. Every family works from dawn until sunset. Your father places a small linen bag filled with grain seeds into your hands for the first time. "You'll help plant this year," he says. The bag feels surprisingly heavy. Together you walk across the freshly watered fields. Your father scatters the first handful of seeds with practiced movements. You carefully copy him, though your steps are slower and your rows far less even. He quietly smiles. No one plants perfectly the first time. You spend the rest of the morning crossing the fields, throwing handfuls of grain into the fertile soil, while other families do the same nearby. Behind them, workers guide oxen through the earth, covering the seeds before birds can steal them. By midday, the entire valley seems alive with movement. Songs drift across the fields as groups of farmers work together. Children carry water from the canals. Elderly villagers sit beneath the shade of date palms, weaving baskets and repairing ropes for the busy weeks ahead. As the days pass, your confidence slowly grows. The work that once seemed impossible begins to feel familiar. Your father no longer watches every step you take. Instead, he trusts you with small tasks of your own, and each new responsibility makes you feel a little less like a child. One evening, while the two of you walk home beneath the orange glow of the setting sun, he places a hand on your shoulder. "You're growing quickly," he says. "Soon you'll be ready to learn work beyond these fields." You look toward the distant river, wondering what he means, as the quiet evening settles once more across the land of ancient Egypt. The following week, your father keeps his promise. Before sunrise, instead of leading you toward the fields, he takes a different path along the Nile. The village slowly disappears behind you. For nearly an hour, the two of you walk beside the river without speaking. The only sounds are the gentle splash of water against the shore and the calls of birds searching for their morning meal. Eventually, you arrive at a small riverside workshop. It is unlike anything you have seen before. Several craftsmen are already at work. One smooths rough pieces of wood with a bronze blade. Another carefully shapes a wooden oar. Nearby, an older man repairs a fishing boat, replacing cracked planks that have served through many flood seasons. The smell of fresh-cut wood fills the air. Your father greets the craftsmen warmly. It soon becomes clear that he has known them for many years. One of the boat builders places a wooden mallet in your hands. "Let's see what you can do," he says with a smile. Your first strike lands far from where it should. The craftsmen laugh quietly, not to mock you, but because every apprentice begins the same way. Patiently, they show you how to hold each tool, how to follow the grain of the wood, and how even the smallest mistake can weaken an entire boat. As the morning passes, you begin to understand that building a boat is more than cutting timber. Every plank must fit perfectly. Every rope must be tied correctly. Every measurement matters. A single mistake on the river could place an entire family in danger. You spend the rest of the day carrying timber, gathering tools, and watching experienced hands transform rough wood into a vessel that will soon sail the Nile. By the time the sun begins to sink, your arms ache from the unfamiliar work. Yet as you look at the unfinished boat resting beside the shore, you feel something you have never felt before. You cannot wait to return tomorrow. The next morning, you arrive at the workshop before most of the craftsmen. A cool breeze drifts across the Nile as the first rays of sunlight touch the unfinished boats resting along the shore. The oldest boat builder is already there, quietly inspecting every plank before the day's work begins. He notices you standing nearby. Without saying a word, he hands you a bundle of rope. Your task seems simple. Sort the ropes, keep the tools dry, and bring whatever the craftsmen ask for. It is not the work you imagined. You had hoped to shape wood or build part of a boat yourself. But as the hours pass, you begin to understand why every apprentice starts this way. By watching closely, you learn far more than you would by rushing. you notice how each piece of timber is chosen for a different purpose. Stronger wood becomes the bottom of the boat, while lighter pieces are used for the sides. Even the smallest wooden peg is carefully carved by hand before being pressed into place. The master craftsman rarely raises his voice. If someone makes a mistake, he simply removes the piece and quietly says, "Do it again." No one argues. No one complains. Every boat that leaves this workshop may carry families, grain, temple offerings, or stone for the Pharaoh's projects. It must be trusted by everyone who steps aboard. During the afternoon, the master finally calls you over. He points to a rough wooden plank. Smooth this edge. You grip the bronze tool with both hands and begin slowly, trying to remember everything you have watched over the past 2 days. The first few strokes are uneven. Then they become steadier. When you finish, the old craftsman runs his hand across the wood. A small smile appears on his face. He gives a single nod before placing the plank with the others. For the first time, a piece shaped by your own hands becomes part of a boat that will one day sail the waters of the Nile. The days at the workshop soon turn into weeks. Each sunrise brings another lesson. Some mornings you help carry long cedar planks from the riverbank. Other days you sort wooden pegs, sharpen bronze tools, or twist fresh flax into strong rope. Every task seems small on its own, yet the master reminds you that a boat is built from hundreds of careful details. Little by little, your hands become steadier. The blisters that once covered your palms begin to disappear. The older craftsmen no longer need to watch every movement you make. One quiet afternoon, the master boat builder rolls out a simple drawing scratched onto a flat wooden board. He points to the curved outline of a boat. "This," he says, "is where every journey begins." He explains that a boat must be balanced from end to end. If one side is heavier than the other, it will lean in the water. If the planks are not joined tightly, the Nile will slowly find its way inside. You listen carefully, trying to remember every word. As the weeks pass, more visitors arrive at the workshop. Fishermen order small boats for their families. Merchants request larger vessels that can carry grain, oil, and pottery between distant towns. Once, a royal messenger arrives to inspect several boats that will be used to transport stone for a government project farther down the Nile. The entire workshop grows silent while he walks among the unfinished vessels. Only after he leaves do the craftsmen begin speaking again. That evening, as the sun disappears beyond the western desert, you and the master sit beside the river. Several boats drift quietly across the glowing water. Without looking away from the Nile, he asks, "Do you know why I have spent my whole life building boats?" You quietly shake your head. He smiles. "Because every boat carries someone's future." You look across the endless river, wondering where those futures will travel next. The following morning, the workshop is busier than usual. A long wooden cargo boat has finally been completed after many weeks of careful work. Today, it will touch the Nile for the very first time. The craftsmen gather quietly along the shore. No one rushes. Every rope is checked once more. Every wooden peg is inspected by hand. The master walks slowly around the boat, looking for even the smallest flaw before giving a single nod. Together, everyone begins pushing. The heavy hull slides forward across smooth wooden rollers. At first, it barely moves. Then, little by little, it begins to glide. With one final push, the boat gently slips into the Nile. For a brief moment, the entire workshop falls silent. The boat floats perfectly. The master smiles with quiet satisfaction. "There," he says, "now it truly belongs to the river." You cannot stop staring. Only a few weeks ago, it was nothing more than scattered pieces of timber. Now it rocks gently on the water, ready to carry people and goods across Egypt. Later that afternoon, the owner arrives to collect it. He thanks each craftsman before loading the first cargo: large sacks of grain, baskets of dried dates, clay jars filled with oil, and tightly rolled bundles of linen. As the boat slowly sails away, you watch until it disappears beyond a bend in the Nile. The workshop quickly returns to its usual routine. Another pile of timber is stacked near the riverbank. Fresh ropes are hung to dry in the warm breeze. The master places a hand on one of the new logs. Without saying much, he simply looks at you and smiles. You already know what comes next. Another boat, another lesson, another journey waiting to begin. Months pass, and with each season, you grow a little taller. The people in the workshop begin to notice the change. The youngest apprentice is no longer carrying only ropes and tools. You now measure timber, shape wooden pegs, and smooth planks without being asked twice. Your hands move with confidence that was impossible only a year ago. One cool morning, the master boat builder calls everyone together. A temple in a nearby city has requested a new ceremonial boat. Unlike ordinary fishing boats or cargo vessels, this one will be used during a sacred festival honoring the gods. Every detail must be flawless. The finest cedar wood is brought from storage. The strongest rope is carefully selected. Even the smallest pieces of wood are examined before they are used. This boat is not built for speed, the master explains. It is built to honor the gods. For the next several weeks, the workshop becomes quieter than usual. No one wastes words. Every craftsman concentrates on perfecting his work. You spend hours sanding curved wooden panels until they feel perfectly smooth beneath your fingertips. Older craftsmen carve elegant lotus flowers and papyrus designs along the sides, while painters prepare bright blue, green, red, and gold pigments that will soon decorate the finished vessel. One afternoon, the master asks you to help polish the carved decorations. You work slowly, afraid that one careless movement could damage weeks of careful effort. When the sunlight touches the polished wood, the carvings seem almost alive. The master studies your work for a long moment before giving another quiet nod. "You've learned patience," he says. You smile, though you say nothing. As the festival draws closer, messengers from the temple begin visiting the workshop almost every day, checking the progress of the sacred boat. For the first time, you realize that the things built by ordinary hands in this small riverside workshop will soon become part of a ceremony witnessed by hundreds of people across ancient Egypt. At last, the day of the festival arrives. Long before sunrise, the ceremonial boat is carefully pulled towards the river. The entire workshop walks beside it in silence. No one laughs. No one speaks louder than a whisper. Even the youngest apprentices understand that this is no ordinary day. When you reach the temple city, the streets are already crowded. Families have traveled from villages across the region. Merchants line the roads with baskets of fruit, fresh bread, pottery, woven linen, and small carved figures of the gods. The towering stone columns of the temple rise high above the gathering crowd, their walls covered with thousands of carefully carved hieroglyphs. Priests dressed in spotless white linen move slowly through the temple courtyard, carrying bowls of incense whose sweet scent drifts through the morning air. Your master quietly tells you to stay close. Together, the craftsmen guide the ceremonial boat toward the stone landing beside the temple. Temple workers carefully inspect every part of it. They run their hands across the polished wood. They examine the carved decorations. They check every rope and every joint. After several long minutes, the oldest priest smiles with satisfaction. He offers a respectful bow to the master boat builder. It is a simple gesture, yet everyone in the workshop understands its meaning. Their work has been accepted. As drums begin to echo across the temple grounds, hundreds of people gather along the riverbank. The priests gently place a beautifully decorated shrine onto the center of the boat. Colorful banners flutter in the breeze. The sunlight reflects from the calm waters of the Nile, making the painted colors of the boat seem brighter than ever before. Standing quietly behind the older craftsmen, you watch everything unfold. Only a few seasons ago, you knew nothing beyond your father's fields. Now, you are witnessing a ceremony that people will remember long after this day has passed. As the ceremony comes to an end, the crowds slowly begin to scatter across the temple grounds. Some families return to the market, while others gather beneath the shade of tall sycamore trees to share bread, figs, and cool water after the long morning. Your master does not hurry back to the workshop. Instead, he leads you through a quieter part of the temple complex, where craftsmen are busy with another kind of work. Stone cutters chip away at enormous blocks of limestone with steady, practiced hands. Nearby, painters carefully fill carved hieroglyphs with bright mineral colors that seem to glow beneath the afternoon sun. Not far away, a group of sculptors shape the face of a large stone statue. You stop and watch in amazement. One sculptor notices your curiosity and laughs softly. He places a small stone into your hands along with a simple copper chisel. "Try," he says. You carefully tap the stone. Nothing happens. You strike again. This time, only a tiny piece breaks away. The sculptor smiles. Stone teaches patience even more than wood. For the next hour, you watch the craftsmen far more than you work. Every movement is slow. Every cut has purpose. One careless strike could ruin weeks of effort. Before leaving, your master thanks the sculptors, explaining that many of them have known each other for years. Boat builders, carpenters, masons, and painters often work on the same royal and temple projects, each depending on the skills of the others. As the sun begins its slow descent, the two of you start the journey back toward the river. Walking through the busy streets, you realize that ancient Egypt is held together not only by pharaohs and priests, but by thousands of ordinary craftsmen whose names will never be carved into stone, even though their work will stand for generations. The journey back to your village takes nearly 2 days. During the day, your boat drifts peacefully with the current of the Nile. At night, it is tied to the riverbank where travelers gather around small cooking fires, sharing bread, dried fish, and stories beneath a sky filled with countless stars. You listen more than you speak. An old fisherman tells of giant crocodiles that sometimes appear in the quieter stretches of the river. A merchant describes cities so large that hundreds of boats can be seen at their docks before sunrise. Another traveller speaks of the vast deserts beyond the fertile valley, where only caravans and experienced guides dare to travel. Every story makes the world seem even larger than before. When you finally arrive home, your younger brother runs toward you with excitement. He wants to hear everything. You tell him about the towering temple, the colourful festival, the enormous statues, and the craftsmen whose hands seemed capable of turning wood and stone into works of art. For the next several evenings, neighbours stop by your family's home. As everyone shares the evening meal, they ask questions about the city. Some have never travelled farther than the neighbouring village. Others quietly remember journeys they made many years ago. Your grandfather smiles as he listens. The more you see, he says, the more you realise how much still waits beyond the next bend of the river. The following morning, life returns to its familiar rhythm. The workshop is already busy before sunrise. Fresh timber has arrived during the night. The master boat builder studies the logs for a moment before looking toward you. "This one," he says, resting his hand on the largest piece of cedar, will become the finest boat we've built yet. You step forward without hesitation. This time, no one needs to tell you where to begin. You already know your place among the craftsmen. Work on the new boat begins the very next morning. Unlike the vessels you helped build before, this one is much larger. The cedar logs are thicker, the planks longer, and every measurement must be checked again and again before a single cut is made. The master gathers everyone around the timber. This boat must carry heavy cargo for many years, he says. If we hurry now, someone may pay for that mistake far down the river. No one reaches for a tool until every craftsman understands the plan. Your first responsibility is different this time. Instead of only carrying supplies, you are trusted to mark the cutting lines on several wooden planks. The master watches your work closely, but says very little. You take a deep breath and begin. Each line is drawn carefully. When you finish, he examines the wood in silence. Finally, he nods. They're straight. It is only 2 words, yet they mean more to you than any long speech. As the days pass, the skeleton of the boat slowly takes shape. The curved ribs rise one after another, giving the vessel its familiar form. Heavy beams are lifted into place with thick ropes, while teams of craftsmen work together, each knowing exactly when to pull and when to hold. During a short break, you ask the oldest carpenter how many boats he has built in his lifetime. He looks across the river for a moment before answering. I stopped counting after 100. The number seems impossible. He smiles at your surprise. A boat lasts for years, he says, but the skills to build one last a lifetime. You think about those words as you return to work. With every plank you smooth, every peg you carve, and every rope you tighten, you feel yourself changing. Not all at once, not in a single day, but little by little, season after season, just as the Nile quietly shapes the land that has given life to Egypt for thousands of years. Nearly a year has passed since you first stepped into the boat builder's workshop. The frightened boy who could barely hold a wooden mallet has slowly disappeared. Now, when the craftsmen begin their work each morning, your hands move almost without thinking. You know where every tool belongs. You can recognize good timber by its weight and sound. Even the younger apprentices have started asking you for help. One cool morning, the master calls you aside. Without a word, he places a bronze measuring cord into your hands. It is a tool he has carried for many years. Today, he says, you'll measure the keel. For a moment, you simply stare at him. The keel is the backbone of the boat. Every other piece depends on it. If it is measured incorrectly, the entire vessel can be ruined before it is even finished. You kneel beside the long cedar beam. The workshop grows unusually quiet. You stretch the measuring cord from one end to the other, checking each mark exactly as the master taught you. Then you repeat the measurement once more. Only after you are completely certain do you look up. The master checks your work himself. Several long moments pass. Then, without saying anything, he hands the cord back to you. The other craftsmen smile. No one needs to explain what has just happened. For the first time, the master has trusted you with one of the most important measurements in the entire workshop. That afternoon, while the others continue shaping the hull, an elderly merchant arrives by boat. He has visited the workshop for many years. After greeting the master, his eyes settle on you. You've grown, he says with a smile. I remember when you could barely lift a bundle of rope. You laugh quietly. It feels like only yesterday. Yet somehow, the seasons have carried you farther than you ever expected. And with every passing year, ancient Egypt continues to reveal another lesson, waiting just beyond the next bend of the Nile. The years continue to pass, one flood season after another. By now, your face has begun to change. You are no longer the curious child who followed his father through the fields. The people in the village greet you as a young craftsman, and your father often smiles quietly when he hears them speak your name. One morning, before the workshop opens, the master asks you to walk with him along the river. The Nile is calm. Fishing boats drift silently through the morning mist, while farmers prepare their fields for another season. The old craftsman stops beside a weathered wooden boat tied to the shore. It is old enough that the wood has faded beneath years of sunlight. "This was the first boat I ever helped build," he says. You look at it with surprise. Though worn by time, it is still floating. The master gently rests his hand against the side of the boat. Good work outlives the person who made it. The words stay in your mind as the two of you return to the workshop. That day, a wealthy merchant arrives with an unusual request. He plans to travel farther south than ever before, visiting towns where rare stone, ivory, incense, and exotic animals are traded along the Nile. For such a journey, he wants a stronger and larger vessel than any ordinary cargo boat. The master studies the merchant for a long moment before accepting the commission. As soon as the merchant leaves, the workshop becomes alive with activity. Fresh cedar logs are unloaded from boats. Long bundles of rope are carried into storage. New bronze tools are sharpened until their edges shine in the sunlight. The master unrolls a fresh sheet of papyrus and begins sketching the outline of the new vessel. After drawing only a few lines, he pauses. Without speaking, he places the reed pen into your hand. For the first time, he invites you to add your own mark to the design. For a moment, you hesitate. The reed pen feels much heavier than it should. The master has spent decades designing boats that have carried merchants, fishermen, priests, and royal supplies across the Nile. Now he is asking you to leave your own mark beside his. You carefully lower the pen onto the papyrus. The workshop is completely silent. With slow, steady movements, you draw the first line exactly where the master instructed. It is only a small part of the design, yet it feels like the most important thing you have ever done. When you finish, the master studies the drawing. A faint smile appears on his face. He rolls up the papyrus and says, "Tomorrow, we begin." The following sunrise finds the entire workshop already at work. The largest cedar logs are placed on wooden supports while teams of craftsmen measure, mark, and prepare every piece before the first cut is made. This time, your responsibilities are greater than ever before. You are no longer simply following instructions. The younger apprentices now look to you whenever they are uncertain. You show them how to sort the timber, how to keep the bronze blades sharp, and how to protect freshly cut wood from the midday sun. Occasionally, you hear yourself repeating the same quiet advice your master once gave you. Take your time. Measure again. Never rush the river. One afternoon, while fitting a curved plank into place, a young apprentice grows frustrated after making the same mistake several times. He lowers his head, expecting to be scolded. Instead, you kneel beside him, adjust his grip on the tool, and patiently guide his hands through each movement. The plank fits perfectly. The apprentice looks at you with relief. Watching from across the workshop, the master says nothing. But before leaving that evening, he gives you the same quiet nod he once received from his own teacher many years ago. The great boat slowly begins to take shape. Week after week, its long cedar frame grows stronger beneath the careful hands of the craftsmen. Every plank is fitted with patience, every joint checked more than once, and every rope pulled tight before the next piece is added. By now, people from nearby villages have started stopping at the workshop simply to watch its progress. Some admire the size of the vessel, others quietly discuss where it might one day travel. The master pays little attention to the visitors. His focus never leaves the boat. One afternoon, while inspecting the hull, he suddenly hands you a smooth wooden mallet. "Finish this section," he says. You pause for only a heartbeat before stepping forward. Several craftsmen continue working nearby, but no one interrupts. Slowly, you secure the final wooden pegs into place, checking each one exactly as you were taught years ago. When the last peg is set, the master runs his hand across the finished planks. He looks at the work for a long moment. Then, without changing his calm expression, he turns to the others. "Good craftsmanship," he says, "is not remembered because it is fast. It is remembered because it lasts." The older craftsmen nod in agreement. You quietly return the mallet, but the master shakes his head. "Keep it." For a moment, you do not understand. Then he smiles. "It belonged to my teacher. For many years, it belonged to me." He places the worn wooden mallet back into your hands. "Now, it belongs to you." The workshop grows completely silent. The younger apprentices watch with wide eyes. The older craftsmen smile, remembering the day they had witnessed the very same tradition many years before. You carefully hold the old mallet, noticing the countless marks left by decades of honest work. For the first time, you realize that you are no longer simply learning a craft. You have become part of a tradition that has been passed from one generation to the next, along the banks of the Nile for longer than anyone can remember. The seasons continue to change, and the workshop never stays quiet for long. Soon after the great cargo boat is completed, new requests begin arriving from villages all along the Nile. Some families need small fishing boats. Others ask for stronger vessels to carry grain after the harvest. Every project brings different challenges, and every challenge teaches another lesson. The master no longer assigns you only simple tasks. Instead, he asks for your opinion. One afternoon, two pieces of cedar are placed side by side. Both appear nearly identical. "Which one would you choose?" he asks. You run your hand across each plank, feeling the grain beneath your fingertips. You tap both pieces gently, listening to the sound they make. After a long moment, you point to the second plank. The master smiles. "And why?" "It is lighter," you reply, "but the grain is straighter. It will bend more evenly." The older craftsmen exchange quiet glances. The master simply nods. You've learned to see with your hands. The days become filled with steady work once again. While shaping timber one morning, you notice a young apprentice struggling to lift a heavy beam by himself. Without being asked, several craftsmen walk over to help. No one complains. No one expects payment. In the workshop, everyone understands that one person may begin the work, but many hands finish it. As the sun begins to set that evening, the finished boats resting beside the Nile gently rise and fall with the current. Some will soon carry fishermen before dawn, some will transport grain to distant towns. Others will deliver stone, timber, and supplies for new temples that are still being built across the kingdom. Standing beside the river, you realize that every boat leaving this workshop becomes part of another family's story. Long after it disappears beyond the bend of the Nile, its journey will continue, just as yours continues with every new season that passes. One quiet morning before the workshop doors are opened, a royal messenger arrives on horseback. His arrival immediately catches everyone's attention. Messengers from the Pharaoh do not visit ordinary workshops without an important purpose. The man steps down, unrolls a sealed scroll of papyrus, and speaks with the master in a calm voice. No one else is invited to listen. The craftsmen continue their work, though every pair of eyes drifts towards the conversation. After several minutes, the messenger leaves as quietly as he came. The master gathers everyone together. A new harbour is being built farther north, he says. They need experienced boat builders. A gentle murmur passes through the workshop. It is a great honour. It is also a great responsibility. Only a few craftsmen will be chosen to make the journey. The master slowly looks around the workshop before his eyes rest on you. You'll come with us. For a moment, you cannot speak. Years ago, you had never travelled beyond your small village. Now, you have been chosen to help build boats for one of the Pharaoh's newest river harbours. Over the following days, preparations begin. Bronze tools are sharpened, bundles of rope are packed. Measuring cords, wooden mallets, chisels, and saws are carefully wrapped in linen before being loaded onto a large cargo boat. Your family helps prepare everything for the journey. Your mother quietly places fresh bread and dried dates into a small woven basket. Your father checks your tools one final time before handing them back without a word. On the morning of your departure, much of the village gathers along the riverbank. Some offer quiet blessings, others simply smile. As the boat slowly pushes away from the shore, you watch your home grow smaller with every passing moment. The familiar palm trees, mud brick houses, and narrow paths slowly fade into the morning mist. Ahead of you, the Nile stretches farther than you can see. For the first time, you are leaving not as a curious child or an apprentice, but as a craftsman trusted to help shape the future of ancient Egypt. The voyage north lasts many days. Each sunrise reveals another stretch of the Nile that you have never seen before. Villages come and go along the riverbanks. Some are no larger than your own home village, while others are crowded with warehouses, workshops and busy docks where dozens of boats are tied together. Whenever the crew stops for the night, you help unload the tools before sharing a simple meal beside the water. The older craftsmen spend the evenings talking about projects they completed years ago. You mostly listen. Every story becomes another lesson. One afternoon, the river grows noticeably wider. More cargo boats begin passing in both directions. Some carry towering cedar logs. Others transport enormous limestone blocks destined for temples and monuments farther downstream. The harbour is close, the master says. By sunset, you finally see it. Rows of unfinished wooden piers stretch far into the Nile. Hundreds of workers move across the shoreline. Carpenters shape timber beneath simple shelters. Stone masons fit massive blocks into place. Labourers carry baskets of sand and clay, while scribes sit beneath shaded tents, carefully recording every shipment that arrives. You have never seen so many people working together. The noise is constant. Hammers strike wood. Bronze tools scrape across timber. Voices echo from every direction. A royal overseer welcomes your group before leading you through the growing harbour. He explains that this place will soon become one of the busiest river ports in the kingdom, serving merchants, government officials, temple workers, and travellers from every corner of Egypt. As you walk farther along the shoreline, dozens of unfinished boats rest on wooden supports, waiting for skilled hands to complete them. The master quietly looks toward you. This workshop, he says, is much larger than ours. He pauses for a moment before smiling. But good craftsmanship is the same everywhere. You take a slow look across the enormous harbour, realizing that another chapter of your journey has only just begun. The following morning begins long before sunrise. The harbour is already awake. Lanterns flicker along the wooden piers as workers unload cargo from boats that arrived during the night. Some carry heavy sacks of grain. Others roll large barrels of oil across the docks, while teams of labourers stack cedar logs into enormous piles beside the workshops. Your master leads you through the busy harbour. Everywhere you look, something new is happening. A group of shipwrights is repairing the damaged hull of a merchant vessel. Nearby, blacksmiths heat bronze until it glows before shaping new chisels and axes. Scribes sit beneath linen awnings, carefully recording the arrival of every shipment, every worker, and every boat. Soon you reach the workshop where your group will be working. It is far larger than the one in your village. Nearly 50 craftsmen are already at work. Some have travelled from distant cities along the Nile. Others have spent their entire lives building boats for the Pharaoh's projects. The overseer introduces your master to the senior craftsman. After a brief conversation, everyone returns to work without wasting a single moment. Your master turns toward you. "Watch first," he says quietly. "Every workshop has its own way." You spend the morning observing. Although the tools are familiar, the methods are different. Instead of small teams, dozens of craftsmen work together on the same vessel. One group shapes the keel, another prepares the ribs, while others cut planks or twist thick ropes for the rigging. Everything moves with remarkable order. No one shouts. No one stands idle. Every craftsman knows exactly where he belongs. As the afternoon sun begins to warm the harbour, one of the senior shipwrights walks toward you carrying a bundle of measuring cords. Without saying much, he places them in your hands. "Come with me," he says. Your first day in the great royal harbour is about to begin. You follow the senior shipwright through the enormous workshop. He walks slowly, stopping beside the skeleton of a half-built cargo vessel. It is larger than any boat you have ever worked on. "This one will carry grain to the royal storehouses," he says. "Every measurement must be exact." He hands you one end of a measuring cord while another craftsman takes the opposite end. "Pull." You do as you're told. The cord tightens across the length of the keel. The shipwright checks the markings, then quietly nods. Again. You repeat the process. Again and again. By midday, you begin to understand that building boats in the royal harbour is different from working in your village. Nothing is done only once. Every line is measured twice. Every plank is inspected by more than one pair of eyes. During a short break, you speak with another young craftsman who has travelled from a city farther south. He tells you he has been working here for 3 flood seasons. "There is always another boat," he says with a smile. "As soon as one leaves the harbour, another takes its place." The afternoon passes quickly. You help carry long cedar planks across the yard, organise bronze tools, and mark timber that will be cut the following morning. As the sun begins to sink, the harbour shows no sign of slowing down. New boats continue arriving. Others prepare to leave before dawn. Standing beside the unfinished vessel, you suddenly realise that this harbour never truly sleeps. Even while one journey ends, another is already beginning. The next morning, the harbour is already alive before sunrise. A cool mist hangs over the Nile as dozens of workers return to their stations. The sound of bronze tools striking wood echoes across the boatyard, mixing with the calls of sailors preparing for another day's work. You return to the unfinished cargo vessel. The senior shipwright is already waiting. Without a word, he hands you a wooden template. "Check the curve of the hull," he says. You carefully press the template against each newly fitted plank. Most fit perfectly. One does not. It rises only slightly above the others, so little that most people would never notice. You point to it. The shipwright runs his hand across the wood before smiling. "Good. It may seem small now, but on the river, small mistakes become big ones." The plank is removed and replaced before the work continues. Nearby, another team begins sealing the seams between the planks with bundles of flax and hot resin to keep the water out. The smell of warm pitch fills the air as experienced craftsmen work patiently along the length of the hull. Later that afternoon, several heavily loaded merchant boats arrive at the harbour. Their crews unload jars of olive oil, baskets of figs, rolls of fine linen, and large bundles of papyrus before preparing for the next stage of their journey. You pause for a moment to watch. Every boat carries something different. Every crew has travelled from somewhere else. The harbour feels less like a single place and more like the meeting point of countless journeys across Egypt. As the sun begins to sink behind the western desert, the senior shipwright walks beside the growing vessel. He studies the day's work in silence before looking toward you. "Tomorrow," he says, "you'll help fit the first deck beams. It will be work that demands steady hands and complete trust." The first deck beams are waiting when you arrive at the harbour. They are heavier than any pieces of timber you have worked with before. The senior shipwright gathers several craftsmen around the unfinished vessel. "No one lifts until everyone is ready," he says. Thick ropes are wrapped around the massive beams. At his signal, every craftsman pulls together. Slowly, the timber rises from the ground. Another team steadies it from both sides while you guide one end toward its proper place. Easy. Hold. A little farther. The beam settles perfectly into its carved supports. Only then does everyone relax. Throughout the morning, the same careful process is repeated. Each beam strengthens the vessel, giving it the shape and strength it will need to carry heavy cargo along the Nile for many years. During a short rest, you notice a group of scribes walking through the harbour. Each carries rolls of papyrus tucked beneath one arm. They stop beside every new shipment, carefully writing down the number of cedar logs, jars of oil, baskets of grain, and bronze tools arriving from different parts of Egypt. Nothing enters the harbour without being recorded. The senior shipwright notices you watching. "In this harbour," he says, "good records are just as important as good craftsmanship." By the afternoon, the framework of the deck is almost complete. Workers begin laying wide wooden planks across the beams while others drill holes and secure them with smooth wooden pegs. You kneel beside one of the joints, checking that every peg sits flush against the timber. A slight gap catches your eye. You point it out before the next plank is fitted. The senior shipwright examines it closely. Without hesitation, he orders the plank to be lifted and adjusted. "No shortcuts," he says quietly. "When this boat is full of cargo, every small detail will matter." As the sun slowly sinks toward the western horizon, you step back and look at the growing vessel. Yesterday, it was only a framework. Today, for the first time, it begins to look like a real ship ready to face the endless waters of the Nile. The following days are filled with steady progress. At sunrise, the harbour echoes with the familiar sounds of hammers, saws, and voices calling across the docks. Every craftsman returns to the same task he left the evening before, as if the work had never stopped. Your team begins fitting the outer planks along the sides of the vessel. Unlike the smaller boats you built in your village, these thick cedar boards must be bent carefully to match the curve of the hull. Large clay pots filled with hot water stand nearby. The craftsmen pour the steaming water over the timber before slowly bending each plank into position. The process cannot be rushed. If the wood bends too quickly, it may crack. If it bends too little, it will never fit correctly. You spend the morning holding the planks steady while other craftsmen secure them with wooden pegs. By midday, another section of the hull is complete. The senior shipwright walks slowly around the vessel, inspecting every joint with experienced eyes. He pauses beside one plank and taps it gently with his knuckles. The sound is slightly different. He asks for the plank to be removed. When it is lifted away, everyone sees a small split hidden beneath the surface. Most people would never have noticed it. The senior shipwright simply smiles. The river always notices. A new plank is brought from storage, and the work begins again. Later that afternoon, several sailors arrive to inspect the growing ship. They ask questions about its size, the weight it will carry, and how many crew members it will need during long journeys along the Nile. You quietly listen while continuing your work. For the first time, you begin to understand that building a boat is only the beginning. Soon, other people will trust their lives, their families, and their valuable cargo to the work of your hands. As evening settles over the harbour, the unfinished vessel stands taller than ever before, its smooth cedar hull glowing warmly beneath the last golden light of the Egyptian sun. The weeks pass quickly, and the great vessel begins to resemble the drawings that once existed only on papyrus. Its broad hull is complete. The sturdy deck stretches from bow to stern. Now the craftsmen turn their attention to the details that will prepare the ship for years of travel along the Nile. You spend the morning helping carve long wooden oars. Each one must be balanced carefully. If an oar is too heavy, the rowers will tire before the journey is over. If it is too light, it may snap beneath the force of the current. Nearby, another group twists thick flax ropes that will secure cargo during long voyages. Others polish the steering oars, smoothing every rough edge until the wood feels almost like stone beneath their hands. Late in the afternoon, the senior shipwright calls everyone together. A large linen sail is carefully unrolled across the dock. It is the biggest sail you have ever seen. Several craftsmen inspect every stitch while others fasten strong wooden spars that will support it when the wind fills the cloth. The shipwright points toward the mast. A strong sail is useless without a strong mast. The next task is the most difficult yet. Using heavy ropes and wooden lifting frames, dozens of craftsmen work together to raise the towering cedar mast. No one speaks, except the foreman. Pull! The mast rises slowly. Hold. The ropes tighten. Forward. Little by little, the great beam reaches its place at the center of the ship. After several tense moments, it settles perfectly into its socket. A quiet smile spreads across the faces of the craftsmen. The hardest part of the day's work is complete. As evening approaches, you stand on the deck and look across the busy harbour. From up here, the Nile seems endless. Boats of every size drift across the water, carrying people, grain, stone, timber, and stories from one end of Egypt to the other. For the first time, you begin to imagine where this great ship will travel once it finally leaves the harbour. The days that follow are among the busiest the harbour has seen in months. With the mast standing firmly in place, attention turns to preparing the vessel for its first journey. Carpenters fit sturdy wooden railings along the deck. Rope makers weave fresh lengths of flax into thick lines, strong enough to hold the heavy sail against the river winds. Blacksmiths sharpen bronze fittings while nearby craftsmen shape smooth wooden pulleys that will help raise and lower the sail. The senior shipwright asks you to inspect the cargo hold. You climb below the deck carrying a small oil lamp. The space is cool and quiet. Rows of heavy support beams stretch from one end of the ship to the other. Clay jars stand neatly arranged beside empty storage compartments where grain, tools, and supplies will soon be packed for the voyage. You move carefully through the narrow passages, checking every joint just as you were taught. A faint trickle of sunlight slips through a tiny gap between two planks. You stop immediately. When the senior shipwright arrives, he kneels beside the opening. He smiles. A good craftsman doesn't ignore what others fail to see. The plank is removed, adjusted, and secured once again until no light passes through. Above the deck, sailors begin practicing with the new rigging. They pull the ropes together, raising the great linen sail part way before lowering it again. The movement is repeated over and over until every sailor knows exactly what to do without hesitation. Watching them, you realize that building the ship was only half the task. Now, another group must learn how to bring it safely to life upon the Nile. As the sun sets beyond the western desert, the completed vessel rests quietly beside the dock. Its polished cedar hull reflects the golden light, while the great mast towers high above every other boat in the harbour. Tomorrow, the harbour will witness something every craftsman quietly waits for. The first time the ship meets the river as a finished vessel. Before sunrise, the harbour is unusually quiet. The finished ship rests beside the dock, its great linen sail neatly folded, its ropes secured, and every cargo compartment carefully inspected one final time. One by one, the craftsmen arrive. No one speaks much. After months of work, there is very little left to do. The senior shipwright slowly walks around the vessel, running his hand across the smooth cedar hull. He checks the mast, the steering oars, and the thick ropes one last time before giving a single nod. It is ready. The word spread quietly through the harbour. Soon, dozens of workers gather along both sides of the ship. Heavy wooden rollers are placed beneath the hull. Thick ropes are fastened at the bow. The foreman raises his hand. Pull! The ropes tighten. The great vessel moves only a finger's width. Again the command is given. This time the ship slides forward with a deep groan as the rollers turn beneath its weight. Slowly, steadily. The bow reaches the edge of the harbour. Then, with one final push from the craftsman, the ship slips into the Nile. For a heartbeat, everyone watches in silence. The vessel rocks gently with the current before settling perfectly on the water. A smile spreads across the face of the senior shipwright. Without saying a word, he steps aside and allows the sailors to board. The crew raises part of the great linen sail, while others untie the final ropes holding the ship to the dock. A light morning breeze catches the cloth. The sail slowly fills. Almost effortlessly, the ship begins moving away from the harbour. Every craftsman watches until it becomes smaller and smaller against the endless river. Beside you, the senior shipwright quietly says, "A ship leaves the harbour only once." But the work behind it is remembered for generations. You remain standing at the water's edge long after the vessel disappears beyond the distant bend of the Nile. The harbour returns to its usual rhythm before the morning is over. Another shipment of cedar logs arrives from the south. Fresh stacks of papyrus are unloaded onto the docks. Fishermen guide their smaller boats between the larger cargo vessels, while merchants bargain over grain, linen, and jars of oil. It is as though the great ship had never left. The senior shipwright gathers the craftsmen once again. "There is always more work," he says. He leads everyone to the far end of the harbour where another vessel waits. Unlike the broad cargo ship, this one is long and narrow. Its design is different. Its purpose is different. "This boat must travel faster," the shipwright explains. "It will carry royal messages between cities." You study the unfinished frame. The hull is slimmer. The planks are lighter. Even the shape of the bow is sharper than anything you have built before. Everything about it has been designed for speed rather than weight. For the next several days, you learn an entirely new way of building. Every measurement is smaller. Every curve is more delicate. The craftsmen spend hours adjusting a single plank until it fits perfectly against the frame. One afternoon, while shaping a narrow cedar board, you accidentally remove slightly more wood than intended. You stop immediately. The mistake is small, almost impossible to notice. The senior shipwright walks over, examines the plank, and quietly sets it aside. "We'll use this on another part of the boat," he says. "Nothing is wasted." A fresh plank is brought from storage, and you begin again. This time, your movements are slower, more careful. By sunset, the new piece fits perfectly into place. The senior shipwright gives an approving nod before continuing his inspection. Around you, the harbour remains as busy as ever. One boat leaves, another arrives. One project ends, another quietly begins beneath the endless skies of ancient Egypt. As the weeks pass, the royal messenger boat begins to take shape. Its narrow hull grows longer each day, designed to move swiftly through the waters of the Nile. Unlike the heavy cargo ships, every piece of timber is carefully trimmed to reduce weight without sacrificing strength. The senior shipwright often reminds the craftsmen of its purpose. This boat carries messages. A late shipment of grain can wait. A delayed royal order cannot. Those words remain in your mind throughout the day. Every measurement feels even more important than before. One morning, a royal messenger arrives to inspect the progress. He wears fine linen and carries a leather case sealed with the mark of the Pharaoh. Instead of speaking immediately, he walks slowly around the unfinished vessel, studying every detail. The senior shipwright answers each of his questions with calm confidence. After the inspection, the messenger nods with satisfaction before continuing his journey farther north. The workshop quickly returns to its routine. You spend the afternoon fitting narrow support beams beneath the deck, while another team prepares the steering oars. Nearby, experienced craftsmen carefully weave fresh flax into lighter, thinner ropes suited for a faster vessel. As the days continue, the final shape of the messenger boat becomes clearer. Its pointed bow cuts cleanly through the air. Its slender frame seems ready to glide across the river before it has even touched the water. One evening, while the last rays of sunlight reflect across the harbour, you climb onto the unfinished deck to check the alignment of several newly fitted planks. From there, you can see nearly the entire harbour. Cargo ships, fishing boats, temple barges, merchant vessels, royal boats. Each serves a different purpose. Yet every one of them begins in the same way. With skilled hands, patient work, and countless ordinary days beside the endless waters of the Nile. The messenger boat is completed just as the cool season begins. Unlike the great cargo vessel, there is no large crowd waiting to watch its launch. Royal boats are built for duty, not celebration. Before dawn, a small group of officials arrives at the harbour. One of them carefully unrolls a sealed scroll of papyrus and hands it to the captain. The message is placed inside a waterproof leather case before being secured beneath the deck. Everything is checked one final time. The ropes, the steering oar, the sail, the supply jars filled with fresh water. The captain gives a quiet signal. Within moments, the crew pushes the slender boat into the Nile. It slips onto the water with remarkable ease. The sailors raise the sail, and the morning breeze immediately carries the vessel away from the harbour. It moves faster than any boat you have ever seen. In only a few minutes, it has become a small shape against the shining river. The senior shipwright watches until it disappears beyond the distant bend. Then he turns back toward the workshop. Another stack of cedar logs has already arrived during the night. Nearby, scribes are recording fresh deliveries while labourers unload bundles of flax, jars of resin, and bronze tools from newly arrived barges. The harbour never waits. As one boat leaves, another is already waiting to be built. You spend the rest of the morning helping sort the new timber. Some logs will become fishing boats, others will carry merchants across the kingdom. A few of the finest cedar beams are marked with the royal seal before being placed inside a covered storehouse. The senior shipwright notices your curiosity. "Those," he says quietly, are reserved for a very special project. He says nothing more, but as you look toward the carefully protected timber, you cannot help wondering what kind of vessel would require the very best wood in all the harbour. The special timber remains untouched for several days. No one in the workshop speaks much about it. The senior shipwright simply continues assigning the usual work, while the finest cedar logs rest beneath a linen cover at the far end of the harbour. Then, one quiet morning, several royal officials arrive together. They carry sealed rolls of papyrus and wear the insignia of the Pharaoh upon their linen robes. The entire workshop pauses. The senior shipwright steps forward to greet them. After a respectful exchange, one official slowly unrolls the royal order. A new vessel has been commissioned, not for merchants, not for fishermen, not for carrying grain. This ship will be built for the Pharaoh's own administration, transporting high-ranking officials and important documents between the kingdom's major cities along the Nile. Every craftsman understands what this means. There can be no mistakes. The covered cedar logs are finally uncovered. Their rich colour shines beneath the morning sun, revealing timber smoother and straighter than anything you have worked with before. The senior shipwright walks beside the stack before turning towards the workshop. The finest wood, the finest tools, and the finest workmanship. The following days are spent preparing rather than building. Each cedar log is inspected for hidden flaws. Bronze blades are sharpened until they gleam. Fresh measuring cords are stretched and checked. Even the work tables are carefully leveled before the first cut is made. You notice that everyone moves a little more slowly. No one is rushing. Every craftsman knows that patience is just as important as skill. Late that afternoon, the senior shipwright places a smooth cedar board in front of you. He studies you for a quiet moment. This plank will become part of the royal vessel. He gently places his hand on the timber. Take your time. You'll only shape it once. You lift your bronze tool, steady your hands, and make the first careful cut as another remarkable chapter of your journey along the Nile quietly begins. Years pass more quietly than you ever imagined. The royal vessel is completed with the same patience and care that shaped every boat before it. It leaves the harbour at sunrise, gliding across the calm waters of the Nile until it becomes only a distant shadow beneath the golden morning sky. The harbour remains busy, just as it always has. New apprentices arrive, carrying the same uncertain expressions you once wore. Without thinking, you begin teaching them the lessons your own master taught you long ago. Measure twice. Never rush. The river remembers every mistake. One evening after the day's work is done, the senior shipwright asks you to walk with him to the end of the harbour. The sun is setting. The Nile glows with soft shades of gold and crimson as fishing boats quietly drift toward home. A cool breeze carries the scent of fresh water across the silent docks. For a long while, neither of you speaks. At last, the old shipwright smiles. "You don't need me anymore." He places a gentle hand on your shoulder before slowly walking back towards the workshop. You remain where you are, watching the endless river, watching another boat disappear beyond the distant horizon. The Nile keeps flowing, just as it always has. Kings will come and go. Cities will rise and fade. New boats will be built, while old ones quietly become part of history. But the peaceful rhythm of the river never truly changes. And somewhere, carried gently by the evening breeze, another ordinary day in ancient Egypt slowly comes to its quiet end.